السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Sorry for being late. We'll get into the subject right away, inshallah. We're continuing in fiqh of the heart with the levels of servitude and worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and with a new level, according to Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, which is manzilatu al-i'tisam. Al-i'tisam. And al-i'tisam is to hold fast to something. This is mentioned in the Quran. And because it's mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in two meanings. اعتصام بالله واعتصام بحبل الله. To hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to hold fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا. واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا, and hold fast to the rope of Allah جميعا, all of you. ولا تفرقوا, and do not disperse. And this is in Surah Al-Imran, verse number 103. The second one, وقال سبحانه وتعالى واعتصموا بالله هو مولاكم فنعم المولى ونعم النصير, which means hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هو مولاكم, he is your mawla, he is your ally, he is your supporter. ونعم النصير, and what a best of a helper that is. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he commanded us with regards to both واعتصموا بحبل الله and واعتصموا بالله تبارك وتعالى. So what is the significance of that, and what does it mean, and what is the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on. So he says rahimahullah that al-i'tisam افتعال من العصمة. Al-i'tisam comes from al-isma, and al-isma is to hold fast to something that will protect you. Holding fast to something that would protect you and push you away from what you might be scared of, or something that might harm the person. So al-isma has something to do with the protection. You hold fast to something to protect you from something. Being saved from something. And that's why what's one of the names of the castles or the fortified places, that it's al-awasim. And even al-awasim or al-asima is a word that is used nowadays for the capitals, the capital of a country. And this is, has some resemblance there. So basically he's saying that the happiness in this world and in the hereafter, it depends on holding fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and holding fast to the rope of Allah. And there's no salvation unless a person is holding fast to these two types of things that are mentioned in the Quran. So what are they? Al-i'tisamu bihabli, as it's mentioned in Surah Al-Imran, to hold fast to the rope of Allah, which is basically the covenant between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran. This is La ilaha illallah. This is all in the translation of the habl of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says here to hold fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect you from deviation. Protect you from deviation, from being deviated. And to hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect you from being perished and destroyed. So the difference between both as far as the outcome is that when you hold fast to the habl of Allah, to the rope of Allah, protects you from deviation. And the other one, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِاللَّهِ, to hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means that protects you from being destroyed, from being perished. And is like someone traveling, and we're all in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like someone has an objective on his path. So he is in need of guidance to the path. While he's on the path, he needs guidance and needs to be safe. So he would never be able to reach his destination unless he has both. He would have to have the guidance where to go and how to reach his destination. And the second thing is that he needs to be safe. So the dalil or the guide is basically sufficient for him to be protected from being deviated or from being lost. And the second one is that he needs to be safe so that he's not perished on the way, he's not killed on the way from those or the harmful things that might be on his path or travelings. And that's what people do when they're traveling. So again, another that would lead us to another level of understanding when you hold fast to the habl, to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which comes with guidance or hidayah, and that is to follow the guide. To follow the guide. And the other one, to hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gives you the strength and the means, the things to defend yourself and your path. So that's why the Salaf, early generations of Islam, when they talked about the rope of Allah, as mentioned in the ayah, it all comes into that meaning. So that's why Abdullah ibn Abbas, he said, the habl of Allah, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, hold fast to the rope of Allah. He said, تَمَسَّكُوا بِدِينِ اللَّهِ, hold fast to the deen of Allah, to the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said, هو الجماعة, the jama'ah of the Muslimin, the believers, when they're upon the truth, of course. And Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, he said, فَإِنَّهَا حَبْلُ اللَّهِ, the jama'ah, to be with the community, with the Muslims, this is the rope of Allah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded. وَإِنَّمَا تَكْرَهُونَ فِي الْجَمَاعَةِ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ فِي الْفُرْقَةِ. He says, then what you dislike in the jama'ah, sometimes people dislike to be with the jama'at al-Muslimin because of whatever reasons. He doesn't like that person, he feels bad about that person, things like this. He says, is better for you than what you love in being dispersed or disunited. Mujahid and Ata and others, they said Ahdullah, the covenant of Allah. And others, they said Al-Quran is the habl of Allah. And he mentioned there a hadith that the Quran is the habl of Allah, is the rope of Allah, is the clear light, is the cure, is the protection. So hablullah al-mateen is the Quran. And this is something that is mentioned in some of the text. Also, as Muqatil said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us to be obedient to him and do not disperse with regards to that matter as the Jews and the Christians did. And the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, that inna Allah yarda lakum thalathan wa yaskhatu lakum thalatha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased for you three things, to be upon three things, and he would hate for you three things. Yarda lakum, he's pleased for you to do what? That you worship him, and ta'buduhu wa la tushriku bi shay'a, that you worship him and you do not associate partners with him. Wa an ta'tasimu bihablillahi jami'an, and that you hold fast all of you to the rope of Allah. Wa an tunasihu man wallahu Allahu amrakum, and that you have the nasiha, the concern of all kinds of goodness to those who are in charge of you. وَيَسْخَطُ لَكُمْ, and he hates for you قِيلَ وَقَالَ. قِيلَ وَقَالَ, they said, he said. It was said and so said. Just talking, narrating things from one another, that causes all kinds of fitan. وَإِضَاعَةَ الْمَالِ, and to waste one's money, and وَكَثْرَةَ السُّؤَالِ, and asking lots of questions that is of no benefit, of course. And this hadith of Muslim, and with the details of what every sentence means. So going back to the subject which is mentioned, the hadith, al-i'tisamu bihablillah, which is basically related to guidance that protects the person from deviation, is basically guarding one's obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being watchful of the commands of Allah. Because you're being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded you to be upon it, and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loved that from you. Not because this is the habit, not this is because that you were raised to be upon this, or any benefit that you would receive. Nothing but being obedient to Allah, submitting yourself to the commands of Allah. And that point specifically, I want to remind myself and everyone, because there's a trap that many Muslims, they fall in. This trap, and even some of the callers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they fall into this trap when they talk to non-Muslims or things of that nature, and they would mention that issue of if you guys believe in freedom of choice, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, why don't you leave us practice our deen because of that, perspective, from that perspective. Or this is, or when a person would say that in the context of, if hijab, it's freedom of religion. This is a trap in some sense, and of course, if it's said, it has to be said in the right context, because wearing hijab, for example, is al-haq, is the truth. It's not just a religion versus another religion, and everybody knows this is the haq. And the Muslim woman wears hijab, the man does this, whatever people do as Muslims is because of the obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why things are done and nothing else. And we hold fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But once you get into this trap, that means you are confirming to some of the deviant principles. That means the truth is a relative thing. When the haqq is an absolute thing. Because what's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the haqq. And what opposes that is falsehood. So the holding fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is basically the taqwa of Allah, as the famous definition of Talq ibn Habib, to act upon the obedience of Allah, ala nurin min Allah, from light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're obedient to Allah based on clear evidences, according to the commands of Allah, hoping for the rewards from Allah. And you stay away and you be abandoning sins, disobeying Allah, ala nurin min Allah, from light from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us. تخافوا عقاب Allah, that you fear the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is also the meaning of man sama Ramadana imanan wa ihtisaban, whoever fasts Ramadan believing in it and seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So fasting is an act of obedience to Allah, and it's done imanan because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded us, and seeking rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So al-i'tisamu bihablillah protects the person from al-bid'ah, protects the person from al-bid'ah. So the bid'ah, innovations in the deen and the like of this, how to be protected from it? By al-i'tisam bihablillah, by holding fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we heard. And also protects the person from what ruins one's actions, So this is al-i'tisamu bihablillah, to hold fast to the rope of Allah. And as far as the second category, which is al-i'tisamu bihi, to hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is basic, which protects you from being perished, from being destroyed, from being harmed, is basically to rely upon Allah and to seek protection from Allah, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you and to save you from all kinds of harm. Because the fruits of al-i'tisam, when someone hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to protect oneself from any harmful thing. And the worst thing that can happen to the believer is the harm that happens to their religion. The believer, the most valuable thing to them is their deen. And to have the deen protected for them, this is the ultimate goal. And for them to be upon this is to hold fast to the rope of Allah, and they hold fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by relying upon Allah to be protected. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Wallahu yudafi'u 'an alladhina amanu. He defends the believers. So if with the condition that a person is a believer, he relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he pushes away from him shubuhat, doubtful matters, shahawat, sinful desires, and the plots of his enemies, the openly, the hidden ones, and the evil within oneself. We need to rely upon Allah to protect us from the evil within our own selves, and to push away even the means of evil after it's already established and it's coming one's way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that protects his slaves from this. So according to how strong the person is holding fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the protection will be there in place for the believers. So this is such an important subject, of course, because it's mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And then, as always, he will talk about the different levels of al-i'tisam, the different levels of al-i'tisam, the different levels of holding fast to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how people are in different levels of that. But this we'll do that inshallah ta'ala next time because of the time. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who are protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and holding fast to the deen of Allah. We extended more of the time of the class. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala because of the next class. Wa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam wa baraka Muhammad wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.